So the purpose of this video is to give you a better idea of how to write a good philosophy paper in my class. Now, good writing is the product of proper training, practice, and hard work, right? So let's get into it and see what's involved, right? Now, one of the first points to be clear about is that a philosophy essay is quite different from an essay in most other subjects. So a philosophy essay is not a research paper. And here's something important. It's not a presentation of your feelings or opinions or impressions. That's a common misconception. And a philosophy paper is not an exercise in literary self-expression. It's not a list of findings of tests or experiments. Rather, a philosophy paper is a reasoned defense of a thesis, at least the types that we're doing in our class. It's a thesis defense paper. Okay, so you're not doing philosophy if you're just giving your opinions or impressions. You're doing philosophy when you clarify your terms and you give rational arguments, reasons for your position. So to start off, you need a specific point that you're going to try to prove, that you're going to establish, that you want me to accept. And then you're going to, of course, in the paper, give me reasons, arguments, grounds, justification for accepting that. So before you write your paper, you should be able to state exactly what it is that you're trying to show. And this is harder than it sounds, okay? But if you're unclear, then you need to keep working at it. So on this slide, I have some possible thesis statements, some sample thesis statements. The first one, Stoicism is a good philosophy because. Okay, so that thesis statement, you at least know my position. That's not bad. Okay, you see some other examples. Now look at the fourth thesis statement. In this paper, I will argue psychological egoism is false because it is unfalsifiable, inflates the meaning of selfish, and confuses first and second order explanations. Now that's a really good thesis in my opinion because, first of all, the position that you're trying to prove is very clear. Egoism is false. Also, this thesis statement previews and organizes the paper. It tells me how I'm going to try to show that. And then the rest of the paper, I follow that order that I presented and try to show it. Okay, so I really like that one. It gives me detail, organizes, previews the paper, and it's very clear about what position you're trying to prove. But all of these thesis statements are fine, and you could work with them and improve them a bit. Okay, so once you have a thesis statement down, the next task is to determine how to go about convincing the reader that your thesis is correct. And in 2 words, your method must be that of rational persuasion. You're going to present arguments. And it's at this point that students frequently make one or more several common errors. Sometimes they feel that since it's clear to them that their thesis is true, it doesn't need much argumentation. But keep in mind, it's very common to overestimate the strength of your position. And that's because you already accept that view. But how will your opponent respond? Have you been cherry picking? So it's safest to assume that your reader is intelligent and knows a lot about your subject, but disagrees with you. Okay. Now, another common mistake is to think that your case will be stronger if you mention virtually every argument you have come across in support of your position. Okay. Now, that fortress approach, trying to mention everything, is not a good strategy. Okay, first of all, it's difficult to keep track of all the arguments. Second, when you try to mention every argument, you're going to mention the weak ones as well as the strong ones, and then I, the reader of your paper, will say, "Oh, they're not really proving much. Look at all these weak arguments," right? Okay, and then another problem here is you're spreading yourself too thin if you try to mention everything. Okay, so those are some problems. Okay. Finally, let me just say this. Write down what you mean. Don't come to me later and say, "Oh, this is what I meant to say. This is what I mean by that." No, what I'm grading you on is what is written down on the paper. Okay? All right, let's take a look at an actual outline that I created. So this paper is on Stoicism. Here's my intro. You can see I'm going to prove that Stoicism is a good philosophy to follow. And maybe I can improve that thesis by listing 3 reasons that I'm going to develop in the paper, or 4 reasons or whatever. Okay. Now in section 1, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to explain how the Stoics meditated and what's in their control and what's not in their control. And I'm going to explain how that can enrich a person's life today. Now section 1 might be 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. I don't know. It could be 4. Okay. Whatever it takes to do that well. Okay. Section 2, I'm going to give you another Stoic theme. I'm going to explain it. And this one is the Stoic view of emotion and how cognitive therapists use that today to enrich the lives of many people. right? And again, it may take 1, 2, or more paragraphs. Section 3, you can see I have another Stoic theme. Now I may want to work on that because it's not very clear. And then Section 4, here's something very important in your paper. You should consider at least one objection that the people who disagree with you, one objection that they would, bring up. Okay? So this objection that you consider should be the strongest objection of your opposition. So for example, a person who thinks Stoicism is not so great, a person who disagrees with your thesis, they would say, well, Stoicism leads to resignation, passivity. So explain that objection in your paper and then tell me why it's not a great objection, or tell me some way around it. Okay, that gives you further support of your thesis. Now, don't give a very weak objection, easy to knock down, okay, kind of like a straw man. Give the strongest objection of the opposition and counter it. Okay, so you have 2 or 3 good arguments. You've replied to the strongest objection, 1 or 2 of those, and then you conclude. You tell me what you proved. Okay, and that's a good outline for a paper. All right, let's go to the next section here. Before getting into the next section, let me remind you that there's no such thing as a piece of good philosophical writing that is unclear, ungrammatical, or unintelligible. Clarity and precision are essential elements. Colleges have writing rooms. You can read your paper aloud and edit for clarity. You can do spell check. You can, if you're in my classes, you can bring your paper in early, 1 to 10 weeks early, and I'll grade it for you and give you feedback. You keep rewriting it until you get the grade you want, right? But if you wait till the deadline, then you get whatever you turn in. That's your final grade. So, again, edit your paper. That takes work, right? And I'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, things to avoid in your philosophy essay. Number 1 is lengthy introductions. These are entirely unnecessary and of no interest to the informed reader. There's no need to point out that your topic is an important one and that one that has interested philosophers for hundreds of years. Introductions should be as brief as possible. Get to the point, get to the thesis, and let's get going. Number 2, lengthy quotations. Inexperienced writers rely too heavily on quotations and paraphrases. Direct quotation is best restricted to those cases where it's essential to establish another writer's exact selection of words. But even paraphrasing should be kept to a minimum. After all, it's your paper. I want to hear your voice. Use mostly your own words. I'm interested in your reasoning, not the reasoning of other people, which I'm very familiar with. Number 3 is fence sitting. Do not present a number of positions in your paper and then end by saying that you're not qualified to settle the matter. In particular, don't close by saying that philosophers have been divided over this issue for as long as humans have been keeping record, and you cannot be expected to resolve the dispute in a few short pages, right? I know that, but you can be expected to take a clear stand based on the evaluation of the arguments presented. Go out on a limb. If you've argued well, it will support you. Keep in mind that people disagree on almost everything. There's even people who still believe the earth is flat. Just because people have disagreed for hundreds of years doesn't mean that everybody's belief is equal to any other person's belief. Equally grounded, equally justified. Okay, number 4 is cuteness. Good philosophical writing usually has an air of simple dignity about it. Your topic is not a joke. No writers whose views you have been asked to read are idiots. If you think they are, then you just haven't understood them. Name calling is inappropriate, and it could never substitute for careful argumentation anyway. Okay, the next one is avoid the fallacies, right? Like begging the question. You're guilty of begging the question or circular reasoning on a particular issue if you somehow presuppose the truth of whatever it is you're trying to show in the course of arguing for it. So if I argue that everyone is selfish because people are always seeking pleasure for themselves, then I've begged the question. I need proof. And don't just assert things. Give me proof. Demonstrate. If I argue most people believe in God, so it's probably true, again, that's the ad populum fallacy. Avoid that. Show me the fallacies of your opposition, but don't commit them yourselves, right? And related to that is you need to demonstrate statements. You can't just assert them. This is a very common mistake. Assertions are not arguments, right? Arguments are where you tell me the position, you give me good reasons for believing it. Assertions is just like, oh, this is true, right? So make arguments, not assertions. Number 7, again, don't say that people will forever disagree. Of course they will. They disagree about everything. That's irrelevant. Okay, show me what it's rational to believe. Okay, and then finally, don't put things in your paper that you don't understand. If I ask you in person to explain any sentence, then you should be able to explain it. Let's go now to things that you should do, some suggestions. Okay, let's talk about things you should do in your paper. So if you look at the rubric I gave you, I'm grading you on accuracy, clarity, and depth of insight. So you want to do those things, and hopefully this video will keep clarifying what that means. Okay, the next thing is you should use good logic, avoid the fallacies, and find the fallacies in the opposition. So in this course, we studied logic the first couple of weeks, and then we've been applying it throughout the course. So keep doing that in your papers. Use the names of fallacies. It's good. Use good logic. Break down arguments in your paper and show me what premise 1 is, premise 2 is, what premise 3 is, what the conclusion is. You can, indent and show me the arguments if you like that. Be very clear. Okay, the next thing is to define technical or ambiguous terms. So if you're writing a paper on egoism, you should define selfish and defend that definition of selfish. Other papers, define free will, God, cause, and so on. The next thing is to organize carefully, right? There should be a logical progression of ideas, one that will be easy for me to follow. Okay, read your paper aloud, make sure it's organized well, it's clear, it flows well. Use the right words is the next one. So when you're writing, don't confuse illusion with allusion, uninterested with disinterested, infer with imply. When I'm reading, I shouldn't see existence misspelled, like with an A in it instead of an E. So in short, you should edit, right? That takes work, but edit. A lot of times I see students leaving out commas. So I would encourage you to edit when there's natural pauses or dependent clauses, put it in the commas. And the good thing is that in most colleges, there's a writing room that can help you edit. You have friends who can read your paper and help you edit it, right? So it takes work to edit, but that's what's needed to make a good, clear paper. So let's see here. The next one is to support your claims. Assume that your reader is constantly asking you questions like, why should I accept that? If you presuppose that he or she is at least mildly skeptical of most of your claims, then you're more likely to succeed in writing a paper that argues for a position instead of simply asserting one. Okay? So substantiate your claims whenever there's a reason to think that your critics would not grant them. The next one is to give credit. So use mostly your own words. I want to hear your own voice. But if you do use the words of other people or their ideas, give a citation, give them credit. Okay. The next one is anticipate objections. Very important. If your position is worth arguing for, there are going to be reasons which have led some people to reject it. And these reasons will amount to criticisms of your position, your thesis. So a good way to demonstrate the strength of your position is to consider one or two of the best objections and show how they can be overcome. And this amounts to kind of stealing the ammunition of your opponent before they have a chance to use it, right? So this amounts to rejecting the grounds for rejecting your case. So you must argue that these criticisms miss the mark as far as your case is concerned, or that in some sense they're ill-conceived despite their initial plausibility. And this takes practice and work. The next thing, again, I can't emphasize this enough, is to edit boldly. Edit, 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 right? So I've never met a person whose first draft of a paper could not be improved significantly by rewriting the paper. The secret to writing is rewriting. The secret to good writing is rewriting often. And it will not do just to reproduce the same thing. Better drafts are almost always shorter drafts. And this is because words have been cut out as ideas have been clarified. It's not because ideas have been left out, but words have been cut out as ideas have been clarified. Every word that's not needed only clutters the paper. And clear sentences don't just happen. They're the result of tough-minded editing, hard work there. You can see a couple of slides here. I'm going to put up on the screen of some bad, I guess you could say, student work, and you can read why. Okay. The next thing that you should do is to have fun, right? This is your chance to clarify and deepen your ideas on some philosophical issue, like an argument for or against God's existence, an argument about whether we have free will, or, how Buddhism or Stoicism could enrich a person's life. So have fun, deepen your ideas. Enrich your life by deeply thinking and putting on paper your ideas here. Okay, the next thing I recommend is to use concrete examples when possible to illustrate the ideas you're talking about. So if you're talking about stoicism, why not say, when a person is driving to the store and they're stuck in traffic? Traffic is something they can't control. So why not bring in stoicism and show how it can help us deal with these modern situations? Use concrete examples. Okay, the last example here is another outline of a paper. I just put this together, so it's very rough. But you can see in the intro, I'm going to try to prove that the world is most likely a simulation. The external world around us, it's not real, right? Now I need to edit that for clarity, but there it is. In section 1, which might be 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs, I don't know, I'm going to give my first big argument for why you should doubt that the external world is real. In section 2, you see, I'm going to give a math argument for why it's not just a 50-50 probability, but it's probably the case that we live in a simulated universe. Now in section 3 and 4, I'm going to address two strong objections, and I'm going to counter them, and you can read those on the screen. So again, I have another outline. Instead of 3 major arguments, I have 2, but I'm considering 2 strongest objections, right? So there's a lot of ways you could organize your paper, but as long as you have 2 or 3 really good arguments for your position, and then you consider 1 or 2 of the strongest objections, you're probably going to have a good case. Now in the conclusion, you can see I tell you what I proved. It's incredible but true. It seems the world is probably a simulation. Okay. Okay, so for further reference and for my resources for this video, the first one is the Harvard College Writing Center, a brief guide to writing the philosophy paper. You can find a link in the description. And then the second one is by Peter Horban, writing a philosophy paper, Simon Fraser University. You can find a link to that for more help. And that's it. Thanks.